Jonathan had never thought he would stand so close to a queen. All his life he worked with tools, fixing machines and building simple things in his village. His father was a farmer, and his mother sold cloth in the market. He dreamed of vengeance, of fire and iron, not of kings, queens, or palaces. Now here he was, inside the crystal hall of the great castle, face to face with the most powerful woman in the land. The hall was filled with lights that sparkled from every corner. The walls seemed to glow, tall and endless, as though they touched the sky. Knights stood in armor, their spears pointed to the ceiling. Lords and ladies in fine clothes whispered behind their hands, watching him with curious eyes. They expected nothing special from him. To them, Jonathan was only a worker invited by luck, chosen to stand among nobles for the celebration of the twin moons. Queen Alira sat on a high seat carved from shining stone. Her crown reflected the light, casting silver patterns onto the floor. She had always kept her distance from common people, and to almost everyone she was more than a ruler, almost a legend. Some looked up at her with fear, some with worship, but none of them dared to meet her eyes directly. But Jonathan did. He could not explain it, even to himself. His hands shook slightly at his sides, and his heart pounded against his chest like a drum. Still he raised his eyes to her, and for a moment the noise of the hall faded. He did not see just a queen. He saw a woman. A woman who carried heavy burdens yet still stood tall. A woman who had faced storms of war but still shone with quiet strength. Alira noticed him staring. She tilted her head, her gaze sharp, though her voice came softer than anyone had expected. She spoke clearly, so all could hear. She asked, "Why are you looking at me?" The whole hall went silent. For a breath, the air seemed frozen. Courtiers widened their eyes. Lords held their tongues. They expected Jonathan to break into fear, to fall to the floor, or to beg for forgiveness. But Jonathan did not look away. He felt his voice move before he even thought of the words. He said, "Because you are beautiful." Gasps filled the hall. Some nobles covered their mouths. A knight dropped his spear in shock. Never before had anyone spoken like that to the queen. To them, it was foolish, reckless, and even dangerous. They waited for her to order guards to drag him away. Yet Queen Alira did not call for punishment. She did not raise her hand, nor frown. Instead, her lips curved only a little, into something between a smile and a secret. Her eyes stayed on Jonathan, steady, as if she wanted to read him more closely. And in that single moment, destiny changed for both the queen and the young man who had dared to speak so plainly in front of her throne. The silence of that night never left the minds of those who stood in the great hall. The boy had spoken so freely, and the queen had not given the order to punish him. The courtiers whispered as soon as they left the place. They said Jonathan was foolish and careless. Some said he was brave, others said he would not live long. But the queen heard all this talk and gave no reply. She only thought of the look in his eyes and the honesty in his voice. The next morning, Jonathan was called to the palace again. He thought it was the end for him. He walked through long halls where carvings of old battles stood on stone walls, and guards lined the way without a word. His steps echoed as if the castle itself was listening. He was led into a chamber, smaller than the hall, but still filled with beauty. The windows reached high, and the sun poured in like falling gold. There, on a lower seat than before, the queen waited. She dismissed the guards so that she and Jonathan could speak alone. She studied his face with care, as if she was searching for something hidden beneath it. At last she asked him, calm but curious, why he had spoken those words so boldly. Jonathan stood, nervous but unshaken. He said he had spoken the truth, told her that beauty was not just the crown she wore, nor the jewels, nor the grand clothes. Told her he had seen the weight she carried on her shoulders, the strength in her silence, and the kindness she hid beneath command. To him that was true beauty, not the kind that faded. The queen listened without interrupting. No one had ever spoken to her in such plain words. People always bowed and praised her with the same empty lines. But this boy who had nothing to gain, who risked his life with every word, spoke with a kind of courage she had not seen before. When the meeting ended, she ordered no punishment. Instead, she told him to remain close to the palace. He was surprised and confused. The nobles were even more shocked when they learned. Rumors spread through every corner of the court. They said the queen was charmed, that his words had cast a small spell over her thoughts. Some claimed he had insulted her and she was testing him before destroying him later. Others feared that his boldness would disturb order in the kingdom. The council grew restless. They argued in chambers behind closed doors. They reminded the queen of danger in showing favor to someone without rank or wealth. But she gave no answer to their warnings. She only returned to her own thoughts. She remembered how he looked at her without fear, not as a throne, but as a person. That memory stayed with her long after the night ended. It was not romance, not yet, but it was a seed, buried quietly, waiting for time to make it grow. And though Jonathan returned to his simple work, he felt the world had changed. He felt watched not with scorn, but with unseen eyes filled with wonder, and he wondered what those eyes might hold next for his life. Days passed, and the palace grew more unsettled. The nobles whispered more loudly now, some even daring to speak before the council that Jonathan should be sent back to his village. They said the queen's mind was fixed too closely on him, and that it was unsafe to keep him near the throne. But Queen Alira gave no answer to their remarks. She kept Jonathan within the city, though he was not a courtier, not a knight, and not a noble. Jonathan worked in the workshops by the river where the kingdom stored broken machines from the old wars. He spent his hours covered in dust, with his hands black from iron and oil. Many thought it was beneath the queen's notice, yet she visited the workshops one evening, quiet and unannounced. The workers bowed and stepped aside as she entered. Jonathan looked up from his bench, his face lit by the glow of a welding torch. He was surprised to see her, but did not look away. She walked among the broken machines and asked him what he saw in all the rust and ruin. He told her he saw pieces of hope. He explained that every broken part could be shaped again, every piece could be joined to build something new. He said the land was not weak if it could rise again from its ruins. She listened, her eyes intent, and for a long time she did not speak. At last she said quietly that his way of seeing the world was rare, and perhaps it was what the kingdom needed most. Not long after, messengers arrived with dark news. Raiders from the coast had attacked small villages. Ships of iron moved across the sea, armed with strange fire that tore through wooden boats with ease. Fear filled the city. Farmers feared for their families, merchants feared for their trade, and the council feared for the future of the kingdom. Many suggested surrendering land to the raiders, or hiding silver and gold before more was stolen. But Queen Alira called her council together and refused to bend. In that meeting, Jonathan stood quietly near the back. He did not speak until the queen herself called his name. Startled, he stepped forward. She ordered him to share his thoughts before all the lords and knights. Some laughed, some scoffed, yet she silenced them. Jonathan then spoke of the broken machines he had studied and the strong walls of the city. He explained how old engines could be rebuilt into weapons strong enough to defend the coast. His words were simple, but his belief was clear and bright, as though he had already seen the victory inside his mind. The council murmured. Some said he was foolish. Others said his plan was impossible, that a common man could not offer what trained commanders could not. But the queen raised her hand for silence. She declared she would support his work. Her voice was final, and no one dared to question her choice again. From that day forward, Jonathan was no longer just a simple worker in the eyes of the court. His hands, his ideas, and his courage would shape the defense of the kingdom. And though many still hated him, none could deny that even the queen herself now trusted his vision. The work began at once. Jonathan spent long nights in the workshops by the river, and the sound of hammers echoed far into the city. The broken engines of old times were pulled from dusty vaults. Rotted wood was stripped away, steel was cleaned, and parts were forged anew. The people who had once mocked Jonathan now watched him with cautious respect, for he worked harder than anyone. The queen visited often, moving through the smoke and sparks, her royal gown brushed with soot, but she never complained. She stood beside her workers and beside Jonathan, speaking words of faith when their hands grew tired. Jonathan designed shields of strong alloy, strange towers that threw beams of light, and walls that could bend fire without shattering. The soldiers trained with the new weapons, city filled with nervous energy, half in fear, half in hope. The raiders grew near, their ships carving across the sea like knives. Smoke was seen on the horizon, and many in the council trembled, saying there was still time to surrender. But the queen's eyes flared with firmness. She declared loudly that their kingdom would never bend, not when they held strength within their own hands. At sunrise, the horns of war shook the air. Black ships came into view with iron hulls and strange burning weapons mounted high upon their decks. The people rushed into the shelters, and the gates of the city closed. The soldiers readied themselves along the walls, while Jonathan ran to the towers holding the weapons he had rebuilt. Flames from the raiders struck the shield lines, but the alloy walls glowed and hummed, holding firm against the storm. Fire rained down and bounced away like water against stone. The defenders cheered, and the queen raised her sword from the high tower with her own hand. Her voice carried like thunder as she called her people to fight with courage. Jonathan moved from tower to tower, adjusting levers, mending bolts, and urging soldiers to trust the machines. At last the strange weapons answered back, sending beams of light into the raider fleet. One by one, their black ships cracked and burst into fire. The sea boiled with smoke and broken iron. But the battle was not simple. A band of raiders reached the coast, slipping through with smaller boats. They ran toward the gates with steel and fire. Jonathan saw the danger and rushed down with nothing but a hammer in his own hands. He fought among the soldiers, not with the skill of a warrior, but with the will of a man who would not let his people fall. He struck and pushed, shielding the children who had not yet fled, his arms burning with effort. From the tower the queen saw him, and in that moment she understood what power truly meant. It was not only the crowns, nor the weapons, nor the shining walls. It was courage that burned inside the heart of one man, plain and unyielding. With that courage, the kingdom surged. By nightfall, the raiders were broken. Their ships burned upon the sea like dying stars. The people of the city stood upon their walls, exhausted but alive, and the banner of the queen still waved proudly in the smoke-filled sky. The city slowly came back to life after the battle. Smoke drifted away, ruins were cleared, and the people sang songs of bravery as they rebuilt their homes. The danger had passed, but the memory of fire and fear still lingered in the hearts of many. Yet in the middle of that sorrow and repair, there was also pride. They had stood against enemies stronger than themselves, and they had held the line. All through the streets people spoke the same name, the name of Jonathan, the boy who had looked at the queen without fear and had fought beside them without hesitation. Jonathan walked through the city humbled by their words. He had never sought glory. He was not a knight, not a general, and not a noble. He only wanted to protect the people he loved and to help build what was broken. But now, even children called out his name, and families pressed bread into his hands to thank him for saving them. Each gift, each smile, felt heavy upon his shoulders, but also warm in his heart. In the palace, Queen Alira held council once more. The generals bowed their heads to her. The same voices that once doubted her decision now praised the plan that had saved them all. Still her eyes turned again and again to Jonathan, who stood quietly at the side, his clothes plain and his hands still rough with work. When the council ended and the nobles left, she called him forward to speak with her alone. She asked him if he remembered the night of the moon celebration when she had asked why he was staring. He said he remembered every part of it. She asked if he still believed the same answer was true now, after all that had happened, after seeing her lead in war and hold the burdens of a whole kingdom. Jonathan met her eyes without fear and told her she was even more beautiful now, not because of crowns or gowns, because he had seen her heart, her strength, and her kindness hidden beneath all of it. He said beauty that lives in the soul is greater than any battle or treasure, and it had burned brighter when she fought for her people. For the first time in many years, the queen let her stern face soften. She set aside her crown and spoke not as a ruler, but as a woman. She told him that from the moment he dared to speak truth against silence, he had changed her world. His gaze had seen her not as a throne, but as a person, and that simple act had awakened a part of her long buried under duty. The city rang with new hope, and while many still wondered at the closeness between their ruler and a simple man, none dared to mock it. They had seen what courage and honesty could do. They had watched a kingdom saved by hands once dismissed as ordinary. The bond between queen and worker became a story carried through every street, not of power gained by birth, but of strength born from truth. And so Jonathan and Alira stood together at the high balcony, looking out over the kingdom. The people cheered below as the banners waved. She asked him once more, gently this time, why he was still looking at her. He smiled with quiet certainty as he answered the same simple words. And with that answer, the bond between them was sealed, not by decree, not by law, but by a truth that could not fade.